Hi, Coach Gary. Welcome to my new series called Loaded Language. What we mean by loaded language is something that high control groups, especially religious high control groups, but even governments really use loaded language all the time as a way of controlling behavior, thought, emotions. Uh, and it's usually, in fact, it's always words that are in the dictionary, but they're used somewhat differently to for an agenda, for a specific reason. And I'll give you an example of something that the U.S. government does because they do it all the time with lots and lots of words, and politicians do it all the time. I used to work in with health insurance, and there's an expression called skilled care. That skilled care has to do with Medicare, which is insurance for the aged and for disabled people in the United States. And skilled care, you probably would think that means that, oh, you're getting care by a nurse that's educated and has a license and is skilled, or maybe a doctor that has skill. That's not what Medicare, how Medicare defines skilled care. It's actually care that is the progress of the patient is in agreement with a specific schedule that Medicare thinks is ideal. So, for example, 3 days after a hip replacement, it's only skilled care if you're now able to walk, or whatever it is. So 4 or 5 days later, you're still in bed and you need other things. They don't call it skilled care anymore, so they don't pay for it the same way. So that's an example of how the government kind of twists words around. And think George Orwell, think 1984. So that's a means of control in a way, but that's not a cultic kind of a thing. But with high control groups that are religions that we might consider cults, they do it the same thing. And again, it's words or expressions that are researchable in the dictionary, but they mean something a little bit different, maybe something very different, different shades of meaning, and they're used for control of the membership. So I compiled a list of just about 20 terms that I'm preliminarily going to work with. I'll probably think of more as time goes on, and you can feel free to send some to me if you think of a few. Um, but first, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the actual definition versus the JW definition in either order. So, for example, and I usually use Merriam-Webster because that's in the United States. That's considered the dictionary. Uh, of course, in England, it's the Oxford English Dictionary, which is an incredibly huge multi-volume. It's like an encyclopedia, and I don't know how many people really use it, but because like how many people actually have that. But I'm going to be using the Merriam-Webster's, which is a good dictionary. And so we're going to compare that to the way that the Jehovah's Witnesses define and use the word. And then we're going to talk about what implications that has for the membership and how it was used for control. And finally, we're going to talk about what does it mean for us today? Is it still something that's in our minds when we think of that expression? Does it trigger us in some way? Or are we so past it that it's actually kind of funny? How do we respond to that now in what it was really trying to describe? So the word that I picked for this first session, this first episode, is worldly, the expression worldly. I like that one because it's almost funny. Because we look back on it and realize like how ridiculous it was that the entire world was divided between Jehovah's Witnesses and worldly people. You're either a JW or you're worldly. Doesn't matter if you're Jewish, Hindu, atheist, doesn't matter what political party you belong to, if you play sports, if you're a musician, you're worldly. If you're Jehovah's Witness, you're okay. If you're worldly, you're not okay. So, so what does the word worldly mean in the dictionary? We'll talk about that first. The first definition is, I think, the one that's used least. At least in my experience, I don't hear it used this way very much. But it says of relating to or devoted to this world and its pursuits rather than to religion or spiritual affairs. So that's pretty simple. It's relating to the world rather than to religion or spiritual affairs. Relating to this world. So you notice there's no moral assignment to that. It's not describing people who are worldly. It's not saying it's good or bad. It's just stating a fact that it's talking. If we're talking about it, either the world and its trappings or religion and spiritual affairs. If we're talking about the world, it's worldly. So again, no. no moral quality assigned to it. So that's the first and I believe less used commonly meaning. And the second meaning is the one that you hear. You'll probably hear the expression "worldly wise," but worldly kind of means the same thing. It basically means possessing or displaying significant experience and knowledge about life and the world. Well, again, is there anything wrong with that? What's wrong with having experience and knowledge about the life and the world? Does that mean you're bad? No. So again, so those are the two dictionary definitions, and we already kind of mentioned that the Jehovah's Witnesses definition has to do with you're either worldly or Jehovah's Witness. And if you're worldly, well, what does that mean? It means you smack of the world. You've got a worldly haircut, you dress in a worldly way, you speak in a worldly manner, but more importantly, all worldly people are immoral in some way. It means you're either sexually immoral, or you're a thief, or you're a liar, or any number of those things or all of those things. You don't have to do all of them to be worldly. And if you're worldly, you don't have to do all of them. But you're going to do at least a couple, if not more, and you might do all of them. So it's a moral definition, which is completely not what the dictionary is talking about. It's a definition of a person's morality and the kind of people that they are, according to the JWs. So that's the dichotomy, the difference between the JW definition and the world's. I say the world, but the outside, the JW definition. But as we know, when we were JWs, we were afraid of it. We were afraid of worldly people. In a way, we didn't walk around cowering in fear every time we saw somebody at the grocery store, because otherwise we'd be constantly in fear because we were outnumbered like 100 to 1 in the United States, but and more in other places. But we were afraid in the sense that we didn't really want to spend too much time with them. Just preach the good news to them. Maybe make a remark on the line at the grocery store about how high the price of lettuce is, and then turn that into a conversation about the good news. But don't spend more time than you have to. If you go to work, okay, fine, you got to work with your workmates, but don't spend too much time at lunch with them. Don't make plans with them after work, because they're worldly people. And the fear is that we'll become just like them. We'll lose God's favor. We'll become sexually immoral. We'll become thieves. We'll become liars. We'll become over drinkers and gluttons in an instant. We'll be all of those things, right? So that was part of the definition, and that's the way it was used to control us, to keep us in, to fear the outside world, right? And now that we're outside, well, we know it's ridiculous, right? I mean, in my own experience, I'll just tell you really quickly that a little while after, I don't know how long it was, after I left, I decided, at the recommendation of a friend, to try dating again. I hadn't done it since I was a teenager, and even then, I really hardly did it because I married really young, a girl that was in the JW organization. So I don't know what I'm getting into. And I wasn't afraid of it, but I just thought, I wonder about if these women are going to get my point that I'm not interested in like hopping into bed. I'm looking for a long-term relationship. So I'm not interested in, doing something too quickly. Um, to my surprise, to my pleasant surprise, I found that they were relieved to learn that. They were like, wow, here's a man that doesn't want to have sex right out of the gate. And they were relieved because they didn't want to do that either, because they're looking for a long-term relationship. And why would you want to, prove that you're easy and loose or whatever if you're looking for a long-term, perhaps a married relationship? So I found out, to my pleasant surprise, that there's a lot of morality in this world, actually. It's not the way the Jehovah's Witnesses described it. So, but anyway, now that we're out, so we realize that. But can it affect us in any kind of a negative way? The fact that we used to interpret the word that way, and now we look at it perhaps differently. So, do we have a healthy view of it now? In other words, well, it is probably most of the time we're good with it, and that's why I picked this word for my first episode, because it's pretty easy to understand. But it is possible to kind of get carried away with it. See what the JWs do when they take regular words that are in the dictionary and in the common culture, and they twist them to mean something a little bit different than what it normally means, and then it becomes a lot different, and then it becomes ridiculously different, like the word worldly. It becomes absurdly different. And no dictionary would ever define it the way the Jehovah's Witnesses do, but that's what they say, and all their members just think this is what it means, even though it's not. uh, so what it is they've exaggerated it to be a word that has moral character, or is talking about moral characters, And those moral characters have to do with, again, habits like drinking, smoking, drug use, risky sex, thievery, honesty, all those things that are considered negative. Some are negative if you overdo them, or some are just always negative. Um, so when we leave and we realize that, hey, I'm a worldly guy now, I guess I'm going to do whatever the heck I feel like doing. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Well, if we go to that opposite extreme and think that I can do all this stuff, so we maybe get a habit of drinking excessively, but perhaps even indulge in alcoholism, um, engage in risky sex all the time, and just these different things, and think that we're free to do that. Um, that's really not a wise use of our freedom. And of course, it's up to everybody to decide where they're going to start and leave off with these different things. But if we're thinking because I'm now worldly and I can do these things, that's then we really haven't learned what worldly really means. Because what worldly really means is possessing or displaying significant experience and knowledge about life and the world. Does that sound like that you have to know about sex by having sex with every person you meet, or you have to find out about using this drug to? No, it just means that we know how to get along in the world. We know how to interact with people. We know how to do business. We know how to be successful, and we're not afraid of it anymore, like we were when we were Jehovah's Witnesses. So that's the key thing: is that we're not afraid of the world. We're not afraid of worldly things, and worldly does not mean what Jehovah's Witnesses taught us it meant. So that's all I have to say today. Is hopefully a little bit short. It got a little bit longer because I wanted to explain the whole nature of this thing. But if you have any ideas on expressions that you think should be covered, there's a really good chance that I'm already aware of it. First of all, but that's okay. If you want to comment in the comments on Facebook, I don't think I'm going to put this up on you. Well, I'll probably put it up on YouTube. You can comment either on the YouTube or in the Facebook post, and I'll either say, yeah, well, thank you. I know about that one already, or I'll add it to my list if it's appropriate. Again, I'm not going to be using expressions like, probably not going to be talking about circuit overseer and governing body and stuff like that. It's just more things that affected our thinking, and we want to make sure we're over it now. So thanks for listening, and we hope to see you again.